program. Mr. Kukreja, having these stations beautified and, creating that atmosphere which is infused with our nation's culture and legacy is the best thing that can be done. If you go to foreign countries like Paris and Moscow and other parts of Eastern and Western Europe, they usually do infuse their culture with their transportational infrastructure. And that's exactly what India is doing, sir.
Great point, Vineet. Thank you. I must say that, when you look at railway stations, of course, I will agree with my co-panelists on the aspect that this is a wonderful initiative. It's a great service to the nation. It's something which has been much needed, much required, reflects the country's progress and march towards Viksit Bharat. All of that is perfectly fine. But if we roll back and look at the turn of 20th century and precisely the point that you made, places like railway stations were synonymous with the architecture, the built environment, the identity of a city. And therefore, whatever gets created needs to still reflect that in the 21st century. And I would say more than a theme which was just mentioned, I think it's about the contextual architecture that needs to come out when you design such large public spaces or infrastructure projects like railway stations in a city. They must be able to reflect the people, the culture, the climate, the history of that particular area. And that is what will bring it the diversity and the unique identity that each railway station architecturally is able to demonstrate. So that's one aspect that is important. But I would also like to here bring a word of caution and a different perspective from what has been discussed so far. And I would use the analogy of boarding a bullet train. Surely some of our stations will, in years to come, have actually bullet trains running there. But my point here is that when we create these enormous number of stations that our large country requires, we don't need to really run at the pace of a bullet train, because what we are creating are going to be landmarks, buildings which are going to outlive each one of us today. So these buildings need to be built with care, caution, and really with that kind of passion. Right now, what happens in some of the infrastructure that I see being built is, it's great. The initiative is something is completely laudable, but the quality, the capital cost going into it also is fairly generous. But the outcome of some of these buildings, I'm involved with the design of some large mega infrastructure projects in the country. And 5 or 10 years later, when one looks at those buildings, dare I say, a couple of years later after I have designed and the building is operational, the buildings start falling apart. And the problem with that is that while we are investing so much in the capex of a project, the operational costs or maintenance budgets which these kind of projects require are somewhere not getting that kind of attention. And therefore, this large investment that is going starts sort of weathering out or falling apart just in a matter of few years. And that is a worrisome factor for me, that these infrastructure projects, you can reduce the capital budget or capital outlay slightly if you need to. But please, the operational costs, maintenance costs of these projects is equally important as, just building them is concerned. That's one aspect. The second aspect is somewhere hand in hand, it might sound philosophical, but believe me, it's equally important, is how do we change the mindset of people and bring in that civic sense which is required. When you look at the way these public buildings are used, you enter into the toilets and you see that it's a dismay, just looking at the sight of them just in a couple of years. I went for the inauguration of a large project, and when the inauguration was taking place, obviously that building had started somehow being in use for a few weeks before that, and already the signs were showing. So this kind of, sort of destruction of our public infrastructure is a shame. And I think we need to start bringing the civic sense. And you know what? It's not impossible. Many of us refer to the good example of Delhi Metro, how that's been able to hold itself in spite of the large number of people that use it. So that's another important aspect that we need to see. And last but not the least, I would say that, whatever we are creating, this infrastructure must be sustainably designed. We cannot keep building at the cost of tree cutting and other environmental hazards. I want to give you an example of a couple of stations that we designed here at CP Kukreja Architects. One of them is the Gandhinagar railway station in the project in which we were involved, which was very unique, that while the railway lines, the trains were running, there was a magnificent five-star hotel which has been built right above those railway tracks. The station holds a large five-star hotel. So anything and everything is possible. But again, my concluding remarks would be that let's keep building this great infrastructure for the city, but let's also remember that we have to handle it responsibly and we have to take care of it and allocate the right budgets to make sure that it's shining for years to come, much like we see many Western railway stations. Even today, the Grand Central in New York or the King's Cross in London or many other iconic railway stations that came up probably a century later. They went through modernization, but they are still standing symbols of dignity of the city.
Absolutely. Great points there.